What is the signal in the AI noise? We'll be talking to one expert today on Builders Live. Hey, I'm Chris Wincom, the co-founder, CEO, and publisher of Technically, the news organization with a community of technologists and entrepreneurs. We keep coming at this AI conversation to try to find what is worth focusing on for local economic development leaders, policymakers, civic stakeholders. I'm going to talk about that today with Kumar Garg. He's president of Renaissance Philanthropy, veteran of the Obama administration. His leadership at Renaissance is focused on philanthropy, advancing science, and technology breakthroughs. Kumar, thank you for being here.
Great to be here.
So, Kumar, I know you're to be an impressive, sharp fella, so I'm dispensing of the small talk and coming right at you, thing that I am trying to wrap my head around. One of Technically's foundational theories, we rely on the Kranzberg law thing of technology is neither good nor bad nor neutral. And I recently had a source poke his finger in my eye and say, what signals do I have that there is any reason to be optimistic that we will use this class of technologies for good? I perceive you as having to be a kind of optimistic guy. So I wonder if you could start off, why do you and Renaissance Philanthropy think there is a kind of beneficial use that we can get out of this class of technologies? Help me understand why I'm not driving us into the ditch.
I think it's a great question. I would say that, let's say we take AI as chapters in a book. I would say like the early chapters are generally positive. You have a technology that, one that basically was the grounding of winning a Nobel Prize. So we took a problem of can we predict the fold of a protein, which used to take a graduate student, sometimes multiple graduate students, multiple years to characterize one protein. And we were able to build AI models that basically could predict it in accuracy and capability that allows us to now have done 200 million of these types. Something that like you could not have solved as a human problem. And that was because we took a bunch of the core elements of AI, which is it's a prediction capability, and we trained it on a whole bunch of existing protein types and said, can you predict future shapes? And that was a huge breakthrough, and it's why the Nobel Committee gave it an award. So I think in particular domains, we can see its potential. It's also, I think, been a pretty successful early consumer technology. You're seeing all these, folks who are like, hey, I can now code up this tool that I live down the street from somebody who's a data scientist. Every day I bump into him and he says, oh, this thing that used to take me weeks, I do it, I think up the idea, and I have basically analysis back later today. So I think part of the early use case has just been that lots of people are geeking out on it as like a pretty useful tool. I think a lot of the negativity is actually foreshadowing around where is this all going to go.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's some instances where people are already concerned, which is around especially AI and AI characters and kids. I think there's a whole like black box problem. But I think most of the challenges that people have, and I think that's a worthwhile area to focus on. I also think like as AI has been getting built out, the rise of, a large number of AI data centers has triggered some reaction. I think on net, that's actually still quite positive. It's leading to job creation. It's causing clean energy deployment to have to grow because you need more energy. I think the big challenge has been in where's this all going? One of the big things that a lot of AI leaders will say is, if this technology keeps going, large classes of middle-class workers might lose their jobs. I think when you have like CEOs of companies say, for us to meet our economic potential of our technology, it's going to lead to really large job displacement. What are people supposed to do? They might naturally worry that this is a technology that might do that. So I think AI today has been a pretty positive story. I think AI and where it will go, given a lot of the statements people have made, is a pretty like complicated picture where we don't know. So that's why I for me, it's not an optimism. It's more like, well, if that's a plausible future, what are the things we should be all collectively doing to invest together to sort of be ready for that future, to manage the upside of these technologies while also, thinking about the downsides. But I would say, compared to other technologies where, a lot of press releases and not a lot of use, there's tons of AI use happening, and people are driving a lot of value, whether it's scientists, data scientists, or just people using it in their everyday life. That doesn't mean that some people aren't using it to make, ever more ambitious cat videos, but there's a certain amount of self-expression there too.
Well, and I think where we risk getting pushed is less the cat video then, and I like this angle you have on there's a kind of foreshadowing we're describing. I think that's right. I agree with that, and we can imagine a kind of weight that we're all collectively doing, and depending on where you are on this conversation, you probably have a set of beliefs or assumptions inside of this, and there's a bunch of good stuff, drug discovery, removing some drudgery from some work, making some jobs better. And then you have the worst cases. When I look at my 20 years I've focused on covering what I've covered, one of the beliefs that I would either be criticized for or I have this assumption that in the world there are more people who want to do good than want to do bad. And so on the whole, on a long enough timeline, any given tool, more people want to use the hammer to build a chair than want to use the hammer as a weapon. And that collectively, if more people are given their shot at using a tool, more good people will do good than bad and will outweigh the bad. That is, if I look back at Techni's founding coverage, it was always kind of assuming that. Get more people access and more people will do good, recognizing some will always do bad. I have never felt in all these years this much pushback on that premise before. There are a lot of people who are feeling a lot less confident on the net good. That, yeah, we might get some gene, protein discovery stuff, Kumar, but look at this. Are you sure that the good outweighs the bad? And I guess just linger for me for a sec. You're behind a meaningfully influential philanthropy that is pushing forward the advances of science. You are part of this leadership. How confident are you in net we get more good for more people advancing this class of technologies?
I think it's a good question. I think that this is not something where we are bystanders. I think we get to shape where the technology goes. I do think the skepticism is a healthy one. I mean, I think when people said, hey, the internet is going to cause a wave of democracies to rise up around the world, or it's going to create a whole new class of independent hobbyists who can run personal businesses on the internet and they'll be disconnected, or that social media will help us connect to our friends. I think there are claims that companies who are building technologies make that can be somewhat utopian, that sometimes work out, sometimes don't. But I always say, I think it's just really important to track things that are getting better and to also have a desire. So, you were saying around your organizing philosophy, I like the one in Our World in Data, which is the world has many problems, the world has gotten substantially better, and we can do more. So if you take global poverty rates are half what they were just a few decades ago. Just in the US, cancer mortality has been cut in half over the past 30 years. That's a lot of individual investments we made in research that are causing people around me to live a lot longer, to beat that cancer prognosis that they would not have been able to do 20 years ago. We're doing better as a society because of that. That doesn't mean that everything is always going to work out. I think,
sure,
the intersection between technology and entertainment has been especially one where it's on net negative often. there's a lot of concern right now around how technology meets betting and like how quickly that has taken off as an industry. So like how we bring the public sector and how we regulate, but also how we build tools and technologies to help us have more control. I think control is a big question. Like, are we actually empowering consumers to have control? How are we structuring markets? I think all of these are important things. And then, you know, even on the upside, you kind of like can't just like say, kind of hand wave on the upside. Like, you know, one of the ideas, for example, you know, I'm excited about is, you know, we've had these really devastating wildfires happen. But think about it globally, like this is a big problem. But if you take advances in the fact that space launch is getting cheaper and our ability to build custom algorithms is getting cheaper, you know, there's technologists who think today that we could have a microsatellite network that looks down on the Earth and is able to spot any wildfire anywhere in the world within 5 minutes of ignition. That's a big deal. That would, you know, that would help a lot. But that's like, someone has to actually, like, a mix of governments and others have to actually put that together so that we can actually build that capability. But the core components of that technology are now starting to arrive on the scene. And so I think that's the piece that I would say, which is that we have to build out a framework and investments and everything else to get that upside. You know, there's the same thing is happening with, if you think about autonomy in cars, you know, which is some of, you know, that started with a DARPA car competition from 2006 to say, could you drive 200 miles across the Mojave Desert and come across the finish line? From that basic technical breakthrough, it has taken a lot of work and a lot of safety testing, you know, where now you're starting to actually have, you know, Waymo cars on streets. And this is like an actual thing that cities could consider adopting. And so I think you have to, this is not an instance where technology is just a given. You actually have to build and say, well, what is it? Which pieces of this technology do we value? And we're gonna really invest in those. And which are the downsides that we really don't want to happen? Like, I think, you know, concerns around kids and children and access, I think that's like a real, I mean, one of the reasons why I think a lot of these no phones in schools has gone from like a idea in a book and taken off like wildfire is that it's like an actual thing you can do. And, you know, it's actually, you know, parents and teachers were harboring a lot of questions that these technologies were distracting. And so I think we have to bring a research lens even to that and actually then test to see, okay, we actually implemented that rule. How did it do? Did it increase attention spans? Did it increase learning outcomes? But that there's like a, you know, we're an advanced society. I think we have to feel like we can actually control some of the knobs and test out different ideas for how these technologies get deployed and then see how it goes.
How much are you feeling like this is a messaging challenge? I think a lot about the vibes. We're in a vibes moment that, you know, your time in the Obama administration, post-Great Recession, we're at the height at that point of technology will save us. It's something that felt other than the financial technology or the financial sector that felt under fire in the Great Recession. And we rode for the 2010s. Tech will save us. Cheap money era will flourish. There was a kind of flourishing. Boy, then there became a big techlash in the late 2010s and a social media reinterpretation that I think is fair to say sets us up for this kind of AI moment that sure seems like at least a lot of Americans felt that they are reimagining what social media meant for them and now mapping on those social media feelings onto AI now. And so there is a kind of skepticism around science, technology, and innovation that I don't think we had in 2015. Certainly didn't have in 2010. So I am finding some of the, hey, look at this micro satellite project getting drowned out by the fears because we did the opposite 10 years ago. How much is that weighing in? Like, it's not just the good stuff we do, but it's whether people know that the good stuff could outweigh the bad stuff.
Yeah, I definitely think the vibes are not great.
Yeah.
Like, I think public attitudes are negative and getting more negative. I think that people's concerns around control and where is this all going, and is this really about whether it's politicians or corporate leaders or others engaging in self-benefit versus public benefit is a big question. But, you know, I come from public service as like my problem orientation, and I think the way you build trust is you actually have to think hard about what do people actually want, and then think about partnerships and implementations of technology that build trust, and then that gives you the license to do more. So, so you know, the advice I would have to political leaders when they're trying to navigate this transition is, I don't think you can be head in the sand on the, you know, like the power of this technology. I think it will continue to grow, but I also think you cannot be like kind of Pollyanna and just sort of say like, you know, it's just going to wave through. I actually think you should be thinking about safeguards for children. You should be thinking about beneficial use cases that help more small businesses start, that help more farmers, you know, do crop disease, that help, like, think about help more people access government services, you know, think about actual use cases and deploying against them. And then I think you need to have a very active ear for when these systems are actually violating people's expectations for their privacy, their rights, and everything else, and then saying we're going to take action. Like, the American system compared to other countries is a something bad happens and then we do something about it system, you know, like,
Yeah.
but you have
I think
to do
some would
something
call
about
that a feature, not a bug. They're
yeah. So we allow innovation to happen, but then we act when things go wrong, right? But that second part, we act when things go wrong, that's what people think is not going to happen. They're like, are our current set of leaders ready to act when signals start to pop up? So if some of these, you know, implementations are causing, you know, parents and children to get targeted in ways that they shouldn't, like, what are we doing about that? So I think the key thing is, trust us is not going to work. Like, we have to actually think about building the tools and technologies to mitigate the downside and invest actively to show, and we have to talk about it along the way and use it to build social trust, and not sort of say, well, you know, believe us, we're building something really important and it'll all work out.
I'm going to lose you in a minute, and I want to try to hustle and see if I can get two questions in. But on that point, when technically origins are in a different era, when there was still a version of federal policymaking happening on these issues, and there still is, to be clear. Industrial policy's certainly been very real the last few years. But one of the things that's changed about our beat, and AI is certainly demonstrating it. There's lots of activity. Sometimes I'll have those friends that'll say, "Oh, why aren't we regulating?" I'm like, I remember social media ride sharing coming out. There was nothing happening then. There's lots of stuff happening now at state and local level. One could argue too much. So maybe just hit on again. One, I wonder how much we should be pushing our leaders to consider what laws are already on the books that should reflect AI. But do you have other guidance for local economic development leaders or policymakers themselves on this AI moment?
I mean, I think on the regulation side, I orient more towards, we probably have the laws on the books. We probably need some more, but we probably have the law on the books. The key question is do we have the technical capability within the regulators to apply the law? So, which is, okay, hey, even under existing law, there are bad actors when it comes to targeting of kids. Are you able to identify those companies, tell them that they're potentially in violation, and ask them what steps are they going to take to come back into the fore. Like a lot of this is boundary protecting and like limiting the bad behavior that happens on the edges. And so you need regulators that understand it. Like, oh, well, we eliminated all the data, but we trained the model on the data and we're keeping the model. Like, there's lots of things that if you technically don't understand the technology, you won't be able to actually police the edges. And so that's the place where I think maybe some laws, but I definitely think you need technical depth. And right now, I think people are trying to write these like rules into some of these legislatures, like you can't do this because it hallucinates. Well, actually, like that was like a problem from like a year ago. Hallucinations are like way down, and like that's not the problem. We have like other problems. So the technology is moving quickly enough that solving pinpoint problems is not as much as giving state agencies, regulators, and others the tools, and then also the technical people to actually be able to say, that these kind of use cases should be off the table. And we're going to actively regulate against those because we think that that's not what people want.
Maybe here on the way out, a framing I think a lot about is what are your foundational beliefs on this class of technologies? And one way I think about that is, are you viewing what we call artificial intelligence as more akin to other big platform shifts of the past, an internet age, or are you thinking of it as something bigger? Do you view a bigger disruption? Where do you, on the Richter scale of technological disruption, what do you assume or take into your decision making around AI? More or less than the internet?
I think that it is like we spend a lot of time talking to technologists and sort of advanced researchers. I think they think it's a really big deal. And we're living through some really big S curve of improvement. We just don't know where we are on the curve, and so I think we have to take it very seriously, but I don't think we have to sort of like then sort of just say, well, it's just a bar that goes up and like, what is there to do? I just think like lots of technology transformations, even really big ones, take a ton of time to progress through society. They have a bunch of different second order, third order, fourth order impacts. And so that's all socially mediated. And
how literally are you taking the 12 to 18 months all computer work will be able to be performed more proficiently? Are you taking that literally as hype from people who are selling services that are marketing them, or a distracting frame altogether?
I think on very specific use cases, we may get to like that in the next 18 months. So like just like coding, like it is very possible that the tooling will keep getting way better, and the job of a software engineer is actually to specify what the work is, eval what the work is, and actually to be managing a range of agents that are actually doing, and how much people are actually typing Python code goes to like 2% of all Python code being written is being written by humans, and most of it is actually being written by agents with lots of checking. But that checking is going to matter a lot because you need it to be deployed in systems and verification. So like suddenly all the humans are going to be software engineers, but they're doing a lot more verification. That might not, like, that's a big deal, but like it may not change the way people are saying around, oh, I need a lot more fewer engineers. It's just suddenly we're doing a very different part of the thing. But like, like when I wrote lines of programming code, you're not like literally writing the line and writing documentation. You're just doing a lot less of that. So some of these things I think will be quite dramatic, but that does not mean that it automatically leads to like the kind of implications that people have in their mind around, and therefore this job goes away. Like we'll see, but like jobs are actually really complex things. Humans are helping inside their organizations mediate between technology and what the company or business they're part of is trying to do. So, like, you have to remember, like, before people showed up with computers at their desks, companies still like wrote memos to each other and did all these meetings, and like people used to show up in the 80s and be part of a really large company, and no one had email, and now people are like, how did information even get around? And you're like, you had couriers and letters, and a document would get copied and delivered across the company.
I know you gotta go. Do you think these class of technologies results in Renaissance Philanthropy having more or fewer employees than you would have if you were doing this work 10 years ago?
Our goal is to not just invest in the technology for public good, but to also dog food the technology. So we are trying as much as possible to say, how do we automate philanthropy? Like, can we have one program officer in a topic and then a bunch of tools, and how far could they get in being able to do diligence, research, and other things? I think right now we ourselves eval our own thing, and we find that the tools only get you so far. Like, there's so much human context around who to bet on and how good an idea is. But on certain components, like, what is the expected value of working in this area? What are the tools are already getting pretty sophisticated. So we want to be early consumers of it. It will probably net out and give us a lot of capability, but we keep running into lots of things that humans are really good at that the technology is not. So even when we try to dog food it, there's limits.
I could speak to Kumar a whole lot longer, but I don't have the time. Kumar, thank you so much for the time. Kumar Garg is the president of Renaissance Philanthropy. Kumar, thanks for being here.
Awesome. Great to be.
See you next time. See everybody.